Defense News is proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, a major advancement in heavy upkeep for some of America's most valuable fighter jets. How did airmen cut the maintenance time in half? Let's find out. And the Army and Marine Corps go electric. Todd South is on hand with a look at how some elements of the military are trying to reduce reliance on traditional fuels. Plus, an up-close look at what volunteer medics face on the front lines in Ukraine. And more grooming regulation updates from the Space Force. Can you wear black lipstick as a guardian? Not with that dress, honey. We've got the latest. Finally, an Airborne Division gets a new home in Alaska. Find out what's behind the maneuver. It's the latest in news and analysis from the Pentagon, so put tuned. This is Defense News Weekly. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Andrea Scott. The F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program has been plagued by a scarcity of available engines, which has slowed down maintenance of the jets. In this week's Actionable Intelligence, Daniel Woolfolk talks to reporter Stephen Losey about how the Air Force turned around the shortages and the delays.
Stephen Losey, welcome back to the show.
Glad to be here.
The F-35 is having some troubles with its engine. What is going on there?
The F-35 is the cornerstone of the Air Force's future fighter fleet, but it's having some availability issues. The Government Accountability Office recently found that in recent years, about 17% of the time, the F-35 hasn't been available due to some spare parts issues. And most of the time, that's been due to a lack of the available and ready F-135 engines that are made by Pratt & Whitney.
What are they doing to fix it?
So the Air Force, one of the things that the Air Force is doing is trying to improve and expand the depot capacity that it uses to maintain these F-135 engines. The biggest depot facility is at Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma City. And they've had some notable success in recent years. Beginning of 2021, it took Tinker about 244 days on average to maintain an F-135 engine. They've now gotten that down to about 106.
The story that you wrote in Defense News is pretty interesting because part of their successes was hiring, which is something that has been really difficult for the rest of us to do, but that actually has been a success in this, and it's helped them kind of move things along.
That's right. One of the problems that they found is that because the F-135 engine is so new, there's not a whole lot of maintainers on the job market who have experience with that kind of engine. So they had to build it from the ground up. About 5 years ago, there were about 17 mechanics that Tinker had on hand. They've now gotten that up to 103, and they're hoping to hire more to expand their capacity to maintain more engines from about 30 to 40 at any given time. But one thing they also did was they tried to revamp how they train mechanics. Used to be they would try to train them on multiple parts of the F-135 maintenance process. They decided to break that up into chunks and have mechanics learn just a single step, doing it over and over again, breaking down the steps until they became experts at that one little section of the process.
And those mechanics, are they civilian or are they active duty military?
They are almost entirely civilian, which is an advantage for Tinker because they aren't required to move to new assignments after every couple of years. Here's one other thing they did. They reached out to the contractor that makes the F-135 engine, Pratt & Whitney, and sent some of their mechanics and staff to Pratt & Whitney's facilities in Connecticut, where they spoke straight to the people who make the engine and learned directly from them the best ways to disassemble, reassemble engines so it goes a lot smoother.
Stephen, as we know, in order to solve a problem, you need to know what the problem is. How did the Air Force identify which problems to fix at Tinker Air Force Base Depot?
the beginning of 2021, Tinker started taking a close look at all of the processes they used to maintain the F-135 engine. They found there were several points in which there were log jams, choke points in the process, places that they could reorganize things, and they set out to try to clear up those log jams in the process. Another thing they found was that in some cases, the mechanics either didn't have the right kind of equipment or they didn't have enough of the equipment that they needed to work on these engines at crucial points. And that became a problem because there were times when F-135 engines were just kind of starting to pile up because they needed to go through this next phase, but the mechanics didn't have the tools to fix them. So that created problems when there just weren't enough. So they went through and figured out what kind of new and additional pieces of equipment that they needed and set out to make sure that they would get into the F-135 Tinker mechanics' hands.
Okay, so the mechanics, they may have had enough people, but not enough tools?
That's right.
One really interesting part of your story that I read is that these engines don't fly in sterile environments. They're in austere places like the sand out in the desert. They are on Navy ships, and that breaks them down. How does that play a role in so many engines being out of pocket right now?
Well, one thing they discovered, as you said, is the sand in the desert environment, as well as the salt in a sea environment. Some of these F-35s are on aircraft carriers. That has a corrosive effect on the turbine blades inside the engines. And Pratt & Whitney developed a new engine blade coating that they're trying to install on F-135 engines to make them more resistant and have them last longer. I believe about last fall, about a quarter of the F-135 engines had this new turbine blade coating. They've made some progress since then. It's now at about 35%. And Pratt & Whitney is hopeful that by 2030, maybe earlier, all of the F-135 engines will have this new turbine blade coating.
And it looks like the depot at Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma has found its stride. It's one location in one spot. Is the Air Force or perhaps other services looking at those successes and seeing if they can replicate them somewhere else?
That's right. Naval Air Station Jacksonville in Florida is going to start up their own F-135 depot facility in the next couple of years. It's going to be roughly comparable in size and capacity to what Tinker has. And Tinker has been compiling all the lessons that they've learned from Pratt & Whitney for their Jacksonville counterparts when they come online, so they can learn from what Tinker has gone through and perhaps get a jump on things.
Stephen, thank you so much for that and many more of your stories on DefenseNews.com.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And up next is Defense Dollars. And now for Defense Dollars. South Korea has approved a plan to buy more Lockheed Martin-made Patriot Advanced Capability 3 missiles to enhance its defenses against North Korea's ballistic missile threat. The plan, which was endorsed in late May by a top decision-making committee of the Defense Acquisition Program Administration, the government will spend $600 million over the next 5 years to procure PAC-3 missile segment enhancement weapons. The government did not disclose a quantity for the missile interceptors. The DAPA committee also approved a plan to upgrade the existing PAC-2 launchers for use with PAC-3 platforms. The PAC-2 launcher enables missiles to intercept hostile targets at an altitude of about 12 miles, whereas the PAC-3 launcher can destroy incoming missiles at an altitude of about 25 miles. The CEO of Palantir Technologies visited Ukraine and met with President Volodymyr Zelensky, marking the first visit of a major Western company to Ukraine since Russia started its attacks in February. CEO Alex Karp met with the President of Ukraine to discuss defense cooperation in a Palantir office in the war-torn country. Palantir is a Palo Alto-based company known for its data analytics and software development capability. It launched with seed money from the CIA and went public in 2020. The U.S. Army in Europe has renewed its interest in pursuing active hard-to-kill protection systems for its Stryker combat vehicle. The program is something that the service considered in 2016, but put on the back burner in 2019. Its renewed interest came from none other than the war in Ukraine. The Army still has a small congressional plus-up of $16 million in 2022 to continue evaluations and work on the IMI-made Iron Fist system for the Bradley. Budget documents show, however, that the service provided no subsequent funding. The United States and its Asian allies have held several joint exercises in the past weeks at sea and in the air to show force to North Korea. The United States, South Korea, and Japan flew Air Force jets on Tuesday as a show of force as their diplomats discussed a coordinated response to a possibly imminent North Korean nuclear test. Last week, South Korea says they and the United States held a joint military exercise in the international waters southeast of Okinawa, Japan. And late last month, South Korea said it held an elephant walk exercise amid concerns about North Korean missile launches. All this comes as Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman traveled to Seoul for discussions with South Korea and Japanese officials over the gathering North Korean threat and warned of a swift and forceful counter-response if North Korea proceeds with a nuclear test explosion, which would be the first of its kind in nearly 5 years. And that's it from around the defense world this week. When we come back, why an Airborne Division is headed to Alaska, and what colors did Space Force approve for nail polish? Find out when we return.
Welcome back. There's been a lot of news around the military recently, starting in the Army. The 11th Airborne Division is the Army's newest division of troops, and it's now officially settled in its new home. Headquartered at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson in Anchorage, Alaska, the division also took on a new nickname, the Arctic Angels. Why Alaska? Leaders said division headquarters' position for an Indo-Pacific fight was prudent as the Pentagon keeps tabs on Russia and China, and tensions slowly rise in the Arctic region. As the climate warms and annual ice sheets melt away, the far north is an area of increased competition for military powers. The final makeup of the division is still in progress, but officials said the need to train in northern conditions played a big part in deciding where to base it. Last week, it was neck tattoos. Now the Space Force is releasing guidance on what Guardians can wear for lipstick and nail polish. First up, ready to do your lips for your day guarding the stars? Gotta avoid those extreme colors, including gold, blue, black, and anything fluorescent. Basically everything else is okay, but things are a little more complicated for nail polish. First, all those fingers gotta match, ladies. And I do mean ladies. Nail polish for men was not approved. Again, you can kind of go for anything that isn't, quote, extreme, but no two-tone or multicolor designs. However, white-tip French manicures, American manicures, and the natural ombre styles are good to go. Details are in the Space Force grooming regs. Now, a troubling story out of Hawaii. Army officials are looking into reports made by an Oahu animal rescue organization accusing soldiers of shooting stray cats with blow darts. The charity alleged that the soldiers bought the blow dart guns while training in Indonesia and brought them back to Hawaii. And the organization has treated multiple cats with darts in them. Officials told local media they have initiated an investigation. And a U.S. service member has been identified as a possible suspect in an April explosion that injured several U.S. troops at a base in eastern Syria. A spokesman for the Army Criminal Investigation Division said the potential suspect is back in the U.S., and the investigation by Army CID and the Air Force Office of Special Investigations is ongoing. The military initially reported that the injuries were caused by artillery or another form of indirect fire. But it later said the April 7th attack was carried out, quote, by the deliberate placement of explosive charges by one or more individuals at an ammo holding area and shower facility on the base. The blast hit 2 support buildings, and 4 service members were evaluated for minor injuries and possible TBIs. The U.S. has several hundred troops in eastern Syria as part of its effort to counter the Islamic State group. Finally, the war in Ukraine has casualties mounting for both sides of the fight, following Russia's invasion more than 3 months ago. Recently, one volunteer told reporters about what it's like on the front lines day to day, as he collects and treats the wounded in a modified camouflage van.
So many hot people, so many so many warriors die. All our warriors stole only one thing. We haven't weapons, we haven't supplies, we haven't ammo. Russian army very big. 19% of trauma it's mortars. The Russians used hard artillery, and 19% soldier have artillery trauma. Today we have 2 injured people on the head, 1 people without leg, and I see 2 guys. Another command give a treatment, but with hand. That's very difficult.
When we come back, it's graduation time. What are sound financial tips you can give your kids headed to college? Our personal finance expert explains. Welcome back. On this edition of Money Minute, Navy Federal Credit Union personal finance expert Jeanette Mack gives tips on some of the best advice you can give graduating seniors as they head off to college.
Whether you're heading to college or entering the workforce straight from high school, it's a great time to learn how to make smart financial decisions. Even if you don't have a regular paycheck yet, you do need and should open a checking and savings account. You'll need a place to put your money for when you're spending and when you're saving. Look for account options with no to low monthly fees. And yes, there are checking accounts that can earn interest, so do look for that too. Now you have a way to always see where your money is going, which helps make creating and sticking to a budget much easier. Remember, every dollar adds up. If you have a debit or credit card, only spend or charge what you can reasonably afford. And once your budget's in check, set goals for saving an emergency fund, because there will be a rainy day. Navigating the real world can be challenging, but adopting good money habits early will kickstart your adult life on sound financial footing.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next week. To get more of our coverage, be sure to check out our headlines online at Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps Times.com and DefenseNews.com. To get a list of our top stories in your inbox every weekday, subscribe to our Early Bird Brief. And make sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And when we come back, the Army and Marine Corps look for ways to electrify their forces. Welcome back. The military across the board has been looking to electrify its forces, seeking benefits from cutting reliance on fossil fuels and gaining a range of other advantages. In this week's MilTech, Todd South looks at how the Army and Marine Corps are making the move.
Soldiers and Marines are giving their vehicles and the bases that support those vehicles an electric facelift. What does that mean? Well, from new tech that uses more electricity and less gas to a net zero Marine base that meets electricity needs with alternative fuels, the Army and Marine Corps are making a lot of electrification moves. At the May Modern Day Marine Expo in Washington, D.C., experts over Marine Corps vehicle fleets and bases laid out initiatives at various bases to update and upgrade their electric vehicle charging capabilities and non-tactical vehicles. But vehicle electrification and smart energy for bases isn't really new. However, an executive order signed this past year by President Joe Biden added fuel to that electric fire, setting goals for ramping up electric vehicle operations and support for those systems. So far, Marine bases in California, Arizona, South Carolina, and Georgia have been the test beds for alternative fueling and improved electric vehicle charging and use. Officials with the Marine Corps Logistics Base in Albany, Georgia, announced in late May that the base was the first installation to achieve what the Defense Department calls net zero. Net zero means it produces as much electricity from renewable green energy sources as it consumes each year. For example, The base has 2 landfill gas generators that produce about 4 megawatts of power, a biomass steam turbine generator that puts out about 8.5 megawatts of energy. Those 2 projects alone cover most of the base's needs. The base typically consumes about 4 to 6 megawatts in the winter and another 8 to 11 megawatts over the summer months. In case that's not enough, officials noted that the base's 27 diesel backup generators can take over in a crisis by pumping out a combined 7 megawatts by themselves. On the tactical side, the Army recently announced an anti-idle switch as part of a larger tactical vehicle electrification kit on its joint light tactical vehicles. The anti-idle switch powers down a vehicle's engine's rumble as it's just sitting around, saving fuel and reducing refueling stops, and also giving silent mode for combat operations, both strategic and tactical pluses. Reducing noise, reducing signature, all help avoid detection on the battlefield. The anti-idle switch by itself saves about 17% more fuel during a standard operations, officials said. That device is in testing and in demonstrations currently. But wait, for those of you who've driven in cold climates, what's up? Am I going to just freeze in the cab of my truck while I'm waiting for the next movement? No. You don't have to run the engine, because the electrification kit gives a fuel-fired option to heat the main cabin without idling the entire engine. Don't ask me how it works, I'm not an engineer. One of the Army's big power hogs, the Bradley Infantry Fighting Vehicle, is also about to get its own electrification upgrade. That's according to Defense News reporting on recent budget documents. And also, the Army is looking to go hybrid on that platform to give operators more juice for all the new systems, from communications to targeting to reconnaissance assets, that the more than 4-decade-old vehicle now has to run. Last up, Army Special Operations have been looking for ways to keep the attack helicopter Little Bird, or the MH-6, flying longer, farther, and faster for more than a decade now. They've been doing that because new helicopters go more than twice the speed of that helicopter. The small helicopter, the Little Bird, kind of made famous by Delta Force in the movie Black Hawk Down, is the only commercial aircraft used by tactical special ops, and it's been upgraded a lot since the 1980s. Engineers are looking at a possible hybrid engine option for the Little Bird, or whatever replaces it, that might allow for the rotor blade change that could reduce drag and speed up the Little Bird. We'll see what they come up with. Reporting from Military Times, this is Todd South.
And that's all we have time for this week. Please visit us on militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more coverage. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.